Hopefully we can see this. Nailing triathlon nutrition. So today we're going to talk about the top triathlon nutrition mistakes that Scott and I see a lot of athletes making. Carbs, should you fear them? What's the deal with carbohydrates? Carb loading, how to properly fuel your sessions and how to properly recover after your sessions, and then some time for Q&A at the end. All right, the top kind of nutrition mistakes that we see people making. The first is not establishing baselines. So this can either be not looking and learning what your daily energy requirements are, whether that's overfueling or underfueling. This not having baselines for how much protein you might need during the day, not looking at how many grams of carbohydrates you're taking in during your bike sessions or your swim sessions. It could be not having your blood labs done and realizing that you are low in vitamin D, potentially low in iron or vitamin B12. Those are some of the common ones that we see in endurance athletes. So the most important thing is understanding where you're at now, what your body needs, and what you need to do in order to be the healthiest, strongest, best performing, best recovered triathlete that you can be. Number two, not practicing carbohydrate intake. Unfortunately, carbohydrates have been demonized. They are, apparently the reason that making everybody fat. They're giving people diabetes. They get in the way of fat burning, on and on and on. Carbohydrates really are the king when it comes to performance, when it comes to recovery, energy. We need carbohydrates. And the problem is, since a lot of people have been, or carbohydrates have been demonized, if you will, athletes aren't consuming them either at all or in quantities sufficient enough that their body will be able to utilize them. So unfortunately, if you're not consuming carbohydrates, like if you want to do the whole train low, race high, meaning training with low carbohydrates and then getting to race day and wanting some kind of performance boost and fueling yourself with a lot of carbohydrates, your body will have lost the ability to utilize carbohydrates in a timely and efficient manner. If you're not taking them in, you're not going to be good about burning them. And so practicing carbohydrate intake, not only to make sure that your body actually utilizes them, but also for you to be able to be the best performing triathlete that you can be. We know that anywhere between 90 and 120 grams of carbohydrates an hour is what works best and which will give you the best performance. If you are, right now taking in 30 grams of carbohydrates, and on race day, you all of a sudden expect your body to be able to handle 100 or 120 grams of carbohydrates, you are going to be sorely mistaken. So if you're not practicing taking in carbohydrates, gels, chews, bars, liquid, and any combination in thereof, you're not going to be able to perform like you want on race day. Lack of sweat rate data. So this is something that the fuelin.app helps you track and encourages you to be mindful of and work towards. But if you, even as an athlete, if you have never stopped and looked at and learned how much you're actually sweating, and this is different. Sweat rate is different than sodium loss. Sweat rate is basically just learning how much sweat you're losing in every hour of training and how you can best be replacing that. Dehydration affects performance. Dehydration affects mental fatigue, motivation. If you have no idea what your sweat rate is, then you're really doing yourself a disservice. Number 4, if you have a single macro focus. So if you think the end all be all is protein and that's all you worry about, if you think it's fat, if you think it's carbohydrates, all of the macronutrients are important. We need fats in order to help our immune system, in order to help our endocrine system. Fats help us absorb fat-soluble vitamins like vitamin D. Fat helps with satiety. Fat is full of vitamins and minerals. Fat tastes good. Fat makes foods taste good. Protein, obviously, we need that for muscle protein synthesis. We need it for satiety. If you're looking to make improvements in body composition, protein is key. And as I said before, carbohydrates are essential for recovery and performance. If you are not eating enough, I see this, whether it is intentional or unintentional, if you're not meeting your daily energy needs, then you will not be the best triathlete that you can be. I can't tell you how many times I've seen triathletes, on 1,200 calories a day, 1,500 calories a day, maybe some even 1,800 calories a day. If you are training for an Ironman, you absolutely should not be surviving on 1,500, 1,600, 1,700 calories a day. That's just not enough to support the training that you're doing. It's not enough to support your hormonal system. Certainly not enough to support the work that you're actually doing. So being mindful of how much your body needs, but also making sure that you're getting that every day. A lot of athletes that start using our app, some of the things that we hear from them most commonly is, oh my gosh, I wasn't getting nearly enough protein. But the other thing is they say, I really thought I was eating more than I'm actually eating. And some signs and symptoms of not fueling your body for women, if you're not getting your monthly cycle, for men or women, if you're not sleeping well, if you always feel exhausted, if your muscles, if you constantly have that body fatigue, if you're losing dramatic amounts of weight, or if you're gaining weight, if your hair is falling out, if you're sick all the time, if you have night sweats, a lot of these are symptoms of a bigger problem that you're potentially not eating enough. And not having a race day plan. I'm always surprised. Triathletes are especially guilty of this, that we will nail down every detail. We will know, every component on our bike is fit, dialed in. We have the expensive pieces. We have this, our tires, everything is lined up. We have our race kit perfectly planned out. We've tested our shoes. We have our Garmin or our smartwatch set up. But yet we haven't made a plan for our race day nutrition. And when I say nutrition is the fourth discipline of triathlon, I absolutely positively mean it. And going into a race without a plan, one, it's just not a smart move. You're leaving performance on the table. Two, it is sabotaging your race. And three, it is adding anxiety to your race day that you otherwise shouldn't have and don't need to have. I talk a lot about your daily, what you're fueling with and hydrating with on your daily and weekly training sessions. That is what becomes your race day nutrition plan. So if you've done it enough, if you've practiced your pre-race breakfast at least 10 times, if you've had at least 10 long brick sessions on the weekend where you're doing like a 3 or 4 or more hour ride straight into a 30 or 60-minute run, if you haven't done enough of those, or if you have done enough of those, it should be so second nature. You should know exactly what you're eating, when you're eating it. You should know if you start to feel bloated or gassy, or if you start to feel full, what to do, how to change your plan. On race day, your nutrition, you should have done it enough that it's automatic, almost like pedaling your feet. You should know exactly what you're going to do and when, and have a backup plan, so that it's one less thing for you to worry about. All right, in terms of carbohydrate timing, nutrient timing, before, during, and after your sessions, this is when it's especially important to pay attention to your nutrition. So before your training, the objective is to top off glycogen stores and prepare for the session ahead. At Fuelin, we use a traffic light system, red, yellow, and green. So red are lower carbohydrate meals, yellow are moderate, and green are higher carbohydrate. if you look at this diagram from left to right, so duration, intensity, and then carbohydrates at the bottom, any session that is under 60 minutes, kind of any intensity, you have the option. If you can go in fasted, you can go in with maybe a banana, some crackers, graham crackers, fig Newtons, you can do a slice of toast, maybe with some almond butter or jelly. That session may or may not need fueling, especially if it's like a second session later in the day and you've had breakfast and a snack and lunch. Your body's probably pretty good if it's under 60 minutes. Now, as you go up in duration and go up in intensity, this is where you'll need to start looking at making sure that you're adding in a pre-workout fuel. So if it's a zone 1-2 session, maybe a recovery, hour-long recovery run or a 2-hour recovery spin, this is where you might want to consider a snack with about 30 or so grams of carbohydrates. As the intensity and the duration go up, you're looking at more. So if it's a zone 3-5, 60 to 120 minutes, this is where you'd want something maybe 50 grams of carbohydrates before, and then any intensity, anything over kind of 2 to 3 hours, that's where you want to make sure you're getting in a higher carb. So between 70 and 100 grams of carbohydrates. And this could be a breakfast before, it could be a high carbohydrate snack, but you really want to make sure that you're going into that session prepared. All right, during. The idea of fueling during your sessions is to keep glycogen from running out and continue to be able to maintain performance, maintain hydration. So if you're, again, looking at from left to right, intensity and duration, that's always going to be your guide when you're trying to think, what should I be fueling with? What should I have before or during? Duration, how long is it, and intensity. Is this a recovery or is this a very high intensity session? If these sessions are lower intensity, you're looking at about every 40 to 60 minutes having something like a sports bar, picky bar, a Cliff bar, maybe having some nut butter. So something that is slower to digest, a little more satiating, something potentially that you need to chew, and doesn't give you that high immediate glucose response energy boost. If your sessions, again, are longer and of high intensity, this is where you want to start looking at something that's going to give you 60 to 90 grams of carbs an hour, gels, chews. If you're looking at, obviously, if it's a high intensity run track session, you're not going to be sucking down on a packet of nut butter. You're going to be using gels and chews. You're going to be hydrating, potentially looking to add some caffeine. This is if you are planning, and I feel important to remind you, if you're planning on using caffeine in a race day situation, you definitely want to make sure that you're practicing that in your training. You want to learn when, how much, how it affects you. Do you have a crash afterwards? So potentially in some of these higher intensity sessions, bringing in some caffeine as well. All right, you've done your hard training. Now it's time for that post-session recovery meal. The goal here is to replenish glycogen stores, to reduce cortisol, promote muscle repair and recovery, rehydrate, and then prepare you for either the session that you have the next day or something that you have later in the day. So maybe the morning was a swim and in the evening you have a run. You want to make sure that you're fueling properly so you can do that run later in the day. Again, with the fuel traffic light system, if it was, this is where we're looking to at goals, body composition versus performance. If you're looking to improve body composition, you're going to be lower on carbohydrates, higher in protein. If you're looking to perform, you're going to be you're still going to be high in protein, but you're also going to add some carbohydrates in there. So again, if it was under 60 minutes, you're looking at 30-ish grams of carbohydrates. an hour to 2 hours, you're looking at about 50. If the session was over 2 hours or a very high intensity, you're looking at about 100 grams. So as you can see, kind of from the meals that we're suggesting, there's grilled steak with salad. So you've got the carbohydrates in the vegetables, potentially some fruit in there, higher in protein with the steak. That moderate, it's basically, again, a high protein. This time it's a salmon with veggies, and then there's some wild black rice in there as well. And then that higher carbohydrate meal, has the pasta with some sausage. So you've got your protein, there's olives, so you've got some healthy fats in there. So definitely a difference. The idea is basically a solid protein serving, anywhere from 30 to 40-ish grams of protein. And then you're adding carbohydrates as you go across. So minimal, moderate, and high. Why am I always talking so much about carbohydrates? They are your body's preferred source of fuel. They're rich in micronutrients, so all of your vitamins and minerals, B vitamins. It's where you're going to pick up things like magnesium, potassium, zinc, selenium. Same thing with a lot of those healthier fats. Why we talk about a balanced plate. Carbohydrates help with the restoration of muscle and liver glycogen. Carbohydrates actually assist in fat metabolism, which is why a lot of times when people go on low carbohydrate diets, they end up losing a lot of weight initially, also because carbohydrates carry water. So a lot of that is water weight. But then their metabolism slows down, their ability to metabolize fat slows down, and they end up gaining as much or more weight once they start incorporating carbohydrates or eating more calorically. Carbohydrates are necessary for strength and force production. If you're doing, which you should be, strength training sessions, if you have a power session on the bike, maybe a hill, you're doing heavy gear work. If you're running trails and you have hill repeats, in order to be able to produce that power, you need carbohydrates. Carbs also improve endurance capacity and performance. You will be able to go longer, more efficiently, if you are including carbohydrates in your diet. All right, so why, again, just kind of to summarize, I use the visual of the rocket, regardless of how you feel about Elon Musk. It's more so just to remind you that carbohydrates really are that super boost for your performance, especially for high intensity efforts. Fuel, that's energy. Energy is power. Power is speed. If you want to go harder, faster, stronger, longer, you need carbohydrates. And the kind of third reminder, carbohydrate intake is trainable. Our gut is a very trainable organ. The more times that you can sit and practice and increase carbohydrate consumption, the better your gut does at digesting and utilizing it. I don't know if you've ever tried to eat more carbohydrates, but you get that you can kind of get that full feeling. Your body will start to adapt and adjust and make it more comfortable and make it better. So many of my athletes have started at the 30 to 50 grams of carbs an hour, and now they're up to 90, 100, 120, and they're feeling better and performing better. And they all say, I never would have thought I could have consumed this much while I was training and racing. And it's because the gut is trainable. Carb intake is trainable, something you can work up to. All right, I'm asked this question a lot when it comes to carbohydrates. Is carb loading a thing? Should we be doing it? How does it work? I know that right now, I know you guys have just kind of finished your season. So now is a good time to think, reflect back. Did I eat enough over the course of the season? Was I actually consuming enough carbohydrates before, during, and after? On race week, this is what we know for carb loading now. It's not like a big meal the night before. It's maintaining and slightly increasing carbohydrate intake across the course of a week. For my last races, if you're looking back, did I properly increase carbohydrates? If not, how could I do better about that in the season ahead? How can I start, now is a great time for you guys to either focus on body composition, to work on training your gut, so that when you're in season next year, you're not uncomfortable when that training really, really matters. So carbohydrate loading, what you want to do is maintain your nutritional focus. Race week is not the time to cut back on calories or kind of eat off of your plan just because you're tapering. So the idea is you're not dramatically increasing calories. You're basically maintaining the same thing. We're just shifting the focus. So potentially less fat and protein and more carbohydrates. A lot of, your body still needs that energy, even though you're not potentially burning excess calories in your training. Males, the carb intake to 6 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. Females, mixed research, but we find about 2 to 3 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight. The one thing that you do want to do the night before and the day before is to reduce your fiber intake. So it's the one time of the year that my athletes will hear me say, one time, however many times you race, it's okay not to have the salad and the big plate of veggies at dinner. You can have, some chicken or fish or tofu and some rice or grains or pasta. It's also the time to potentially consider reducing alcohol intake while increasing hydration over the course of that week. If you step back and kind of look at the bigger plan, the macro plan, if you will, leading up to your race. So about 12 weeks before race day, this is where you want to be doing sweat testing. You want to be doing carbohydrate testing, some gut training, and starting to plan your race nutrition test. Look at your calendar. What big brick sessions do you have coming up over the next 12 weeks that you can actually be practicing your race day breakfast, practicing your bike fueling on those longer rides at race intensity, and then practicing how you feel transitioning into a run. That 6 weeks before, this is where you want to look at exactly, race-like conditions in your brick sessions. So, it's no longer the 3 to 4 hour zone 2 ride. Your coaches have probably planned in, 5-ish hours with some race pace intensity sessions in there, some longer brick sessions. It's really important that you practice that race nutrition setup. Where are you going to store all of the gels that you're going to be taking? How are you going to organize your bottles? Are you going to have a bento box for some of those bars? Are you going to keep them in your tri kit? So really knowing when and where and the actual setup. How are you going to reach the bottle from behind? It's all of these things that, if you're practicing on the trainer inside, it's different when you're actually outside and you have to logistically negotiate how you get all of your fueling and hydration. It's also a good time to practice carbohydrate loading. So 1 to 2 days before a longer brick session, let's say, increasing carbohydrate to that either 6 or 3 grams per kilogram. So you know how you feel. Carbohydrates do carry water. So you are going to potentially feel a little more full, potentially have some weight gain. But again, that's because your body is holding on to that water. So you want to know, you don't just want your A race all of a sudden to be trying to practice carbohydrate loading. Definitely practicing your race day breakfast, getting that down, what you're going to have, when you're going to have it. If you have a race that starts at 7 a.m. and on race day you're going to be up at 4 having your breakfast, you should have a couple sessions where you actually do that. You're up at 4, you're eating what you're going to eat, and then you're starting your training on that Saturday or Sunday by 7 a.m. so you know how your body works. And this is always a good reminder to order the products that you're going to be using. So many times athletes have got down to the end. And I mean, I know we all have like Amazon. I don't know how good the Amazon Prime is there, but here it's pretty easy to get stuff. But why not be prepared? Have it all laid out, order everything that you need, the gels, the chews, the bars, set them aside. It's one less thing for you to have to worry about. Know where they're going to go in your bag. I would say make sure that it's your carry-on, if at all possible. So if your bags, if you're traveling to a race and your bags are lost, at least you have your race kit, your helmet, your cleats, your run shoes, and your race nutrition. All the rest you can probably do without or pick up when you get to your location. All right, 2 weeks before, this is where you're just basically refining the process, potentially bringing in some heat protocol, 11 days, in order to help your body adjust and adapt to that heat. Although you guys live in a very, very hot climate for at least a couple months out of the year. So you're at an advantage to the rest of us in that you're pretty heat acclimated, heat acclimatized, because you live and train and deal with those hot temperatures quite regularly and consistently. All right, so some of the key takeaways. High carb fueling, higher carbohydrates equals higher performance. It is what it is. Finding that right balance for you, that's what's important. Don't be scared of fueling in session. It's going to help the training that you're doing, but it's also going to help prepare your gut for race day. Remembering that your gut is trainable, there will be some uncomfortable sessions. That's important. Just like uncomfortable training sessions, these are adaptations that your body needs to make. Daily nutrition, focus on the purpose. Why are you fueling your body? Are you meeting your energy requirements? Are you doing this to be healthy, to, understanding why you're eating what you're eating is just as important as the actual foods that you're eating. Make sure that you are fueling for the work required. Make sure that you are actually giving your body enough of what it needs. And I think just a key tip, if I could offer one, is to plan ahead. Look at the week coming up. Look at your work schedule, life schedule, family schedule, training schedule. How are you going to fuel those sessions before, during, and after? Potentially bringing in some meal planning so that you're not left starving after a swim session. It can be a game changer if you actually taking some of that stress and anxiety away, and planning ahead really will help you not only fuel better, but actually feel better about the fueling that you're doing. All right, so really quickly, if you don't know about Fuelin or haven't heard of us, we're a performance training-based nutrition. So we sync with either Training Peaks, Today's Plan, or Final Surge. We look at your training, the app looks at that, and then prescribes exactly the macronutrients that you need, and then suggests the fueling for your before, during, and after. It's highly personalized based on your training. So exactly what you're doing. Purpose-driven, you as the athlete get to decide, I'm working on body composition, I'm working on performance, I'm working on carbohydrate capacity, the data that we provide. So you'll be able to track all of the food that you're eating, the macros, you'll be able to see weight, you'll be able to see carbohydrate intake, sweat, all of your sweat testing. The focus is on performance and health. So really removing kind of that guesswork and showing you right there on your phone what it is that you have and need to support your training and racing. Again, just to see the way that it works. So we download the app, we sync it with your training plan. We give you the recommendations. You get to kind of measure your progress, track your macros, sweat rate, carb capacity, body weight. And then we have, for our community, we have a really vibrant Facebook community, our Instagram, we always, are posting things over there constantly. We have weekly Q&As, Scott and Alan and myself, actually like a session just like this every week where we talk with our athletes and different topics that we decide, that they suggest. Once a month, it's an open Q&A where they can ask us anything. The idea is to really educate as much as it is help you with your fueling. Just to give you an idea of when I'm talking about carbohydrate testing, what that looks like. So if you go out and do let's say 3-hour ride, you would, after you got back and you were eating your recovery meal, you would mark how much solid carbohydrate, how much liquid carbohydrate, how you felt. You would, as you can see, you'd pick, I had Cliff Blocks, I had a gel, I had a Picky Bar, how you felt, any GI discomfort, leaving any comments. And then as you test over time, you will get results. Like the red sessions mean it's lower than we would like. The green sessions mean you're at that optimal 90 to 120 grams of carbohydrates an hour. So the idea is to be able to gradually increase, first of all, know your intake, gradually increase that amount, do it repetitively so that your body is used to it, but also so that you can experience the physiological changes and the perception, oh my gosh, I actually do feel really good when I'm consuming a higher amount of carbohydrates. And then testing over a variety of sessions. So maybe a longer swim session, a bike or a run, a brick session, so that in different temperatures, as you can see, different temperatures and conditions. Same with the sweat rate testing, looking at the duration of the session, the temperature, what kind of session it was, how much fluid you consumed and lost, your thirst rating, any GI, what products you use. We like to log that. It's really fun, in my opinion, because you kind of get to be the scientist. Again, we track this over time to get you to that optimal sweat loss and recomp goal. Another picture of the app, just so you can see what it looks like. We give you your daily macro targets and then suggested meals. So how much you should be consuming at each of your meals. And then if you break that down, if you look in at a more detailed level, here's the breakfast suggestion. On this bike, this athlete has a higher intensity, so like a zone 4 bike session. So we're prescribing about 100 to 120 grams of carbs an hour, some hydration, suggesting their pre-bike meal, in-session fueling, and then after. So what again, you can choose from our recipes, you can make your own based off of the macros that we're recommending. All right, let's see. I think we got through everything. Now, there was a lot of information. So I want to open it up to questions, going back and asking maybe any specifications on some of these. Opening it up. It's the first question is always awkward, but I guarantee everybody has some kind of a question. So feel free to chime in, turn your camera on, leave a comment in the side, any of the above.
Thank you so much for all this useful information, Elizabeth. It's I think it's really good for us to have all this education in terms of nutrition, and it's gonna be for sure very useful. I have one question, or actually from your takeaways, you mentioned don't be scared of fueling in session during the session, and this is something that I see like very often. I mean, many athletes are scared of gaining weight if they fuel during, or if they consume sugars, let's say, or carbs during the session. Is that gonna happen? Is there any risk of gaining weight during the training, or it's okay, it's fine?
Yeah, it's a great question, and that's probably the most common, I guess, pushback I get from athletes is, well, if I don't eat in my session, then that's going to help towards my weight loss goals. Or, like they equate the lack of caloric intake with potential body composition goals, if you will. And the kind of key component there is, in order to, unless you plan on doing your races fasted, which I can't imagine why you would, you're really doing yourself a disservice not utilizing some kinds of fuel in some of your sessions. Now, not all of them need fueling, but if it is a higher intensity session, and this is kind of a generalization, it's a zone 4 or 5 session, and it is over an hour, you're definitely going to want to, and you're going to need to consume some fuel during that session. You will perform better in that session, which means you're making training, like you're making those adaptations faster, better, stronger as you go along. It's going to help you to recover. And as far as the sugars go, your body is utilizing those. And as long as you're not kind of going over, right? Some athletes, the session probably, if it's a 60-minute session, you probably don't need a gel every 10 minutes. That would be a little bit excessive, but potentially every 20 minutes, depending on what you had before your session and kind of what you're planning on having afterwards. That's where that comes into play. So making sure your body knows how to use them, that's the key component, and fueling that session. As long as outside of training, you're not going over and above your daily energy requirements, you're not going to be gaining weight. You're not going to be putting your health at risk. All right,
perfect, thanks.
Yeah, Omar, thank you for raising your hand.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah, okay, so I had the question. If I have a hard session, a really hard training session, but it's only an hour long, when should I consider taking a gel, when should I not?
Sure. So potentially about 15 to 20 minutes in is when I would suggest starting, whether with a gel or with some chews. Kind of depends too a little bit on the session. If you had a snack maybe before, like let's say it's a morning bike session. So you woke up and you haven't eaten since dinner the day before, potentially having, it's exactly a 60-minute session, potentially having a banana or maybe a slice of toast with some almond butter, then you could probably get away with waiting until about the 30-minute mark, the 25 to 30-minute mark. If you went into that session totally fasted, I would say start fueling earlier so that that glucose fructose mix can start to kick in, so you have energy for the intense. I'm assuming most sessions will give you 15-20 minutes to warm up, and so that's when either you have the carbohydrates ready from your snack, or if you didn't have a snack, then you have them ready by the time your warm up is finished. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so I should take gels during hard sessions, even if they're only an hour long, like take one at least.
Yep, it's definitely good for performance and just good getting your body used to taking in carbohydrates. And if you just had lunch, let's say, or it's a dinner session or something you have to squeeze in after dinner and you've had a big meal, then you can reassess just how much you might need if the session itself, has maybe in an hour-long session, if there may be 8 by 1 minute sprints. Like I wouldn't count that session, even though there's some intensity in there. I wouldn't count it as a zone 4 or 5 session just because there are some zone intensities in there. Does that make sense? Like judge the overall value of the session to see if you need the fueling.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right.
So, first of all, thank you for this talk. It's very informative. I've been using Fuelin for almost a week now, but the problem is that in the past, I used to eat very not little, but not as much as I need to eat fuel during sessions and after sessions. And when I started using Fuelin, I realized the macros are way more than what I'm used to.
Oh.
So very hard for me to hit those macros. So are there any tips and tricks to like try to hit the protein and carbs and all of that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So first of all, are you a plant-based athlete or do you also eat meat and fish?
Yeah, I eat anything.
Okay. And I only ask that because that it's a lot harder, like you mentioned, protein for plant-based athletes. It's doable. It's just, you kind of have to shift. So what I like to do with my kind of fueling requirements, I always look at the protein first, because that's kind of, people think that's the hardest one to get in. So let's say it's 120 grams of protein for the day. So I look at my kind of my three main meals and I go, okay, I need 30 grams at breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or 30 to 40 grams at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then I'm going to have 2 snacks that have about 10 to 15 grams in each of those. So once I kind of wrap my mind around that, like how I evenly kind of divide them up, then it makes it easier. Like, oh, okay, so my breakfasts, I'll pick, like, I know I have kind of 3 options that have 30 to 40 grams. So it could be a protein shake, protein smoothie. It could be like eggs and like a big egg and veggie scramble. It can be a bowl of like a yogurt bowl. So 1.5 cups of yogurt with some fruit and nuts mixed in. So it's like, I kind of know in my head what some breakfasts are that meet that. Same thing for lunch, kind of same thing for dinner. And then in terms of snacks, I go, okay, do I hard boil some eggs? Do I have some cottage cheese with fruit? So it's like, I kind of pick those protein rich foods. Now, if you feel like you're having trouble, like, oh, well, I had 2 eggs and 2 egg whites, that combined is only, 24 grams of protein, let's say. It's like, well, if I'm trying to get to 30, okay, I know that I could add some cottage cheese in with my scrambled eggs, and that'll give me, which if you've never tried, it makes them super creamy and really light and delicious. Or I add 2 tablespoons of hemp seeds. Those have 10 grams of protein in them. Or I look for a bread that has a little bit more protein in it, like a sprouted or a grain bread. And it's like all of those little things add up. So once you know kind of what's going to be the bulk, then you can add in, if for dinner, you can use maybe like a lentil pasta or a chickpea or garbanzo pasta. That's a little higher in protein. So yeah, I think that's how I do the protein stuff. And then I find that the fats kind of work out themselves. Like if I'm eating red meat or fatty fish like salmon or sardines or eggs, those naturally have fats in them. So it's not very difficult for me to meet that. If anything, I have to like, oh, I don't get to eat a whole avocado today. I have to eat a half because I have fish for lunch and beef for dinner or something like that. Yeah, and then I think the in-session fueling is difficult for a lot of people. And that's where I say, just start small, like figure out where you're at and add like 5 grams at a time. So you don't try to overwhelm yourself. Like, oh, if I'm usually not eating anything. So today I'll start with 1 gel. Mm-hmm. And then the next session, maybe I'll do a gel and have a couple of chews and like slowly start to build. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah. Yes, thank you.
And if leave comments in the app, there's that little chat section. I don't know if you've seen it or utilized it yet, but it's a great way to throw some questions out there. Tune into one of our Fuelin sessions or, the Q&A or whatever. Like, I think we have one coming up tomorrow. Although I don't know timing wise, it might not work out. So you might have to watch it after, but.
At 4 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah, no, never mind. But hey,
Thank
welcome
you.
to the Fuelin family. It's nice to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks. These are good questions. I'm sure I'm trying to think of what some other ones that I always get a lot of. Are gels better than chews, or like, does it matter? No, it's whatever works best for you. A lot of times some athletes can't do liquid carbs. Others can't do gels. And to that, I say, find a gel that you like. There's plenty out there. If you're getting GI issues, if something's not working, like, you don't have to suffer. There are enough options out there that you can find something that will work, find a combination that works for you. I think it's important to look ahead at your race and see what they're going to be offering on the race course, and at least practice with that 1 or 2 times. So, you know, if you're not bringing your own, or if you lose some of your own fueling, how your body responds. But I would say, like, you shouldn't have to live with GI discomfort. There's enough products on the market that we should be able to figure something out for you. All right. Well, I guess if no one has any other questions, then we can.
Sorry, just a quick one, Elizabeth. Hi, thank you. This is Dalal. My question is more on with the app and just the meal plan in general. I think in the beginning, it'll be difficult maybe to get the hang of things. So does it adapt to, for example, let's say you miss lunch, or the next day, you don't, like with work schedule and all of that, it's difficult on a specific day to meal plan or something like that. So does it adapt to that, or how are you supposed to adapt to that? Thank you.
That's a great question. So no, we won't, if we see that, you missed lunch, that's not going to, the app has a running kind of total. So as you enter your meals in throughout the day, it will tell you, oh, you still have 30 grams of protein left, or you're still 100 grams of carbohydrate off, or something like that. So it's intuitive in that you'll see what you have left for the day. But it's not going to change then the rest of your week to try to make up for or decrease if you went over one day. That's more intuitive on your end. And the meal planning, prepping part, what is nice about the app is that it shows you, here's what the ideal day would look like. And there is a learning curve, I think, in getting used to understanding how to plan and prep. But if anything, I think it makes it easier to go, oh yeah, it doesn't matter specifically, I don't have to have 6 ounces of chicken breast and 2 ounces of pasta and this. It's like, oh yeah, I just need to find something. I'm busy at lunch, I have to order something in, or I have to grab something on my way at the end of the day. I just need to make sure that I have something that has about 30 grams of protein in it. And then you can adjust from there. So I think it makes it actually easier to navigate than it does, because we're not telling you specifically what to eat. We're saying, here's what we would eat. These are the macros that you need. Now you fill it in based on what you have in your kitchen, what you have next to your work to go by, or what's, what you feel like on that day as well. Good question. All right. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. I know it's late in the evening. I appreciate appreciate your time. And Thomas, maybe we'll get another one of these as the season is ramping up, focused specifically on maybe nutrition for strength training, nutrition in the heat, some more practical tips for gut training, stuff like that.
Yeah, sure. It's been really useful. So yeah, thank you so much for your time, for your patience with the questions. And yeah, looking forward to have another one. I think there's one more. I don't thank you. It's just the chat. So yeah, looking forward to start working or work in the future together.
Yes, and we'll get you the recording and then a discount code for the group, for your club. for those that want to sign up for that.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening, everyone.
Bye-bye.